Dave Rupert posted on social media about the new stretch value for sizing properties in CSS, such as width and height. It's a really useful new feature, but a lot of people had questions about how it's different from 100%. And I also wanted to compare it to 100 viewport height, which is something that a lot of people use to try and fill the space of the viewport. So let's take a look quick. I have an HTML element, body element, main, and then an H1 inside of there. And currently, because I haven't set the height on any of these elements, we get a height that comes from the contents. So that H1 has a height, has some extra margin around it, and then each of our other elements sort of shrink wraps to fit around that content. And that's called intrinsic sizing. So we have something with some intrinsic size to it in the contents, and then everything else takes its size from that. But once we start setting height or width values, we're providing an extrinsic size instead. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go back to set height of 100 viewport height, VH units. This has stretched our contents to fill the screen, and it works fine until we add something like borders or padding or margins. And we can see that each of these boxes ends up with a border box that is 100% the height of the viewport. We can line each one up with the viewport to see that. But all together, they are overflowing each other, and those borders, padding, and margin are getting added to our heights. The height of 1080, that's coming from the viewport height, and we've set that as the border height of all three of our boxes, even though those three boxes have different space to work in, and they're being offset different amounts from the viewport, so they're not going to line up right the way that we want. We can partially fix this by changing to height 100%. Now, because we're setting the box sizing to border box, this would be a little bit different if we were doing content box, in which case the padding would also be an issue here and the border would still be an issue. But by setting the border box, we have fixed part of the problem. It's only the margins that are adding additional space there, and that we would have to account for separately. And some people would account for this maybe by setting a height of calc 100% minus 3ems times 2. That's minus twice the margin. We can do that, but that's getting very explicit about something when we really just want to be able to say, take up the space that is left over. And that's what the stretch value does. Rather than setting the height to exactly the size of the parent content box, that's what 100% refers to, we're setting the height to stretch and fill the remaining space. So it's a little bit similar to using flexbox for stretching or using grid fraction units for stretching. And it's a little more resilient than using 100%, which is actually sort of a fixed value, even though we think of it as pretty fluid, or viewport units, which are even more of a fixed value. So highly recommend checking out Stretch. It's not available in Firefox yet, but hopefully it will be soon. If you're interested in going deeper on how CSS works and how you can write more resilient styles, I would recommend checking out some of my workshops. I can bring them to your team, present workshops to your company, but also I will be presenting one of my workshops at Smashing Conference this fall, and I would love if you wanted to attend. I'll be in New York in October.